Welcome to Pour Temecula, a local wine, beer, and beverage podcast with your hosts Rick DeLucio and Shannon Cole. Today I'm exploring the world of fine wine auctions, rare bottles, and the business of consignment with Powell Yang, Director of Sales and Consignment for Spectrum Wine and a seasoned industry pro with global experience from Napa to Hong Kong. If you've ever wondered how wine auctions work, what to look for in older vintages, signs of a damaged wine, or where Temecula fits into the broader collectible market, this one's for you. Cheers. If you answered Corbeau for the name of the first wine that Reagan's family made, well, you would be correct. And now for the three winners randomly selected from the correct responses. Each will receive a $25 gift card to Corbeau Wine and Tea House. Ryan S., Sarah H., and Mark B. Congratulations! We'll be in touch soon. Now, on to the episode. Welcome back to Pour Temecula. Today's guest brings a global palette and an even broader perspective. Powell Yang is the Director of Sales and Consignment for Spectrum Wine Auctions in Santa Ana, one of the leading players in the fine wine auction world. But that title barely scratches the surface. He's a seasoned industry veteran who has lived and worked in Napa, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and now splits his time between the U.S. and key Asian wine markets. Whether it's navigating the intricacies of consigning a cellar, sourcing rare bottles for collectors, or understanding how regional wine cultures evolve, Powell brings a unique East meets West vantage point. We're digging into the world of fine wine auctions, vintage buying, and what it takes to move serious bottles. And we'll even ask where a region like Temecula fits into the bigger picture. I should also add that Powell and I have been friends for quite a while, even running an online message board, if that's even still a thing, about wine called the Wino Depot, which we won't talk about Home Depot's role in bringing that down. But welcome, Powell.
Hello there, Rick. Long time. It's been a while. I guess we go back, 20 years now?
I would say 20,
20
more
plus.
than that.
Yeah, 20 plus.
We all kind of met along with the group I ran with in Chicago online on the Wine Spectator message boards back when that was a thing and there was no Facebook, Instagram, any of that. Just words on a computer screen. And we all ended up getting together, meeting, and having many fun evenings, first of all, which is what wine should be, and sometimes with some great wine, sometimes with our own concoctions or blends of wines that we would make at the end of evenings, which were pretty wild. So I have to ask, for our listeners who aren't familiar with wine auctions, can you give us the kind of quick version of how Spectrum Wine works and what your role looks like from day to day?
Well, so for those of you that's not familiar with the wine auction side of, purchasing, because most of people would buy directly from the winery or retail shops in your neighborhood or even across America. Wine auction offers another source for you to buy your wines. And for the most part, these would be wines with a little bit of age on it. So it's not going to be, mostly it's not going to be new release. Majority of them is going to be wines that perhaps got 5-10 years on it, or even right at the peak of the window. And I think the biggest difference that most of your listener will be interested to know is that auction pricing are far, far better than retail pricing, meaning that if you buy a bottle of wine at retail for $100, you might be able to find it in the auction market, including the buyer's premium that you do have to pay on top of the hammer price. And that would be probably about 30-40% off retail. Sometimes more, depends on what kind of wine you're buying, how sharp of a bidder you are, and a little bit of everything else. So I don't want to say auction market is a discount market, but it's more of a true supply and demand market. Any winery can come out and say, I want to sell my wine for $1,000, but nobody's going to buy it. And if somebody is, stupid enough to buy it for $1,000 and decided to not drink it and say, you know what, I don't want this bottle. They'll send it to auction, and then auction will give you what the true market value of a product is at a time, in any moment in time, I guess. So that's kind of what auction market is. I mean, you can think of it as a stock market too, right? A stock market is based on supply and demand of stock. And, people pay what the market value dictates at. So auction market is effectively the same thing for wine.
Yeah, that's a great example. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about consignment. And I think people will be really interested in this. I know I personally am. But if someone has a serious cellar and they're looking to sell it, what should they know before they approach an auction house?
Let's just start. Let's just do a process from beginning to the end. Okay. Before you want to approach your auction house, the number one thing you have to do, or you should do, is that you should have a list of inventory. Okay.
Of all your inventory, or should you really break down like what you are looking to get rid of?
Yes and no, because sometimes people don't really know what they want to get rid of. Sometimes they will see, oh, this wine has increased value in so much, maybe I don't need to keep it anymore. I mean, you can certainly put your wines into two buckets. Wines that you definitely want to keep and drink, wines that you could live without, and make a list of the items that you can live without. You'll send that to us and we'll do an inventory. I mean, we'll do appraisal for you. I think the question you were asking is there's not a right answer for it, because a lot of the time what we see, especially with our repeat consignor, is that they keep on buying wine and they keep on running out of room. So
that's never happened to me.
Yeah.
Never.
So,
or anyone else.
So you would either have to do a cellar diminishment party like our good friend Otis would do every couple of years and open 100 bottles at a time, or you sell wine.
Do people come into those situations with a really inflated value, or are they more realistic about what they can get for that consignment?
I would say over half of people think they can get retail price, but what they don't remember is that a retail shop have a lot of overhead. And for a collector to be selling wine, unless you want to do it all on your own and put in all the work and all the time, you're not going to get that price, right? And then in the auction business, is trying to sell the item at a fair market value. And it's a happy medium of getting it sold quickly and getting you the highest return at the same time. I would say probably over half of people would come in with false expectation, but then we would show these folks global auction data, not just from Spectrum, not just from our house. We have data from Christie's, Sotheby's, HDH, Zacky's, Akers. You name it, we have it. It's kept by a site called Wine Market Journal, and they pull all auction data from all around the world. So, and that's a database I say every single auction house use. Using that database, we can see where the bottle's true market is. We're certainly going to run into people that say, you know what, no, I don't want to sell it, because they don't want to lose money based on what they paid. A lot of time you hear about, a Cinquannon Rosé, the first release got $40,000 bottle. Yeah, but that's like, you hear all the good news, right? You hear all the ones that went up crazy. But the reality is, I say conservatively, 80% or maybe even 90% of the wine that's made in the world will decrease in value once you buy it from the shelf. It's like buying a car. 90% of the car you'll ever buy will lose value, if not 95%. So buying wine is not that different. Whatever you buy is going to lose value, and that's the reality of any consumer product goods that we have around us.
Are there any regions or styles that are really hot right now, other than your Burgundy, of course, which seems never ending?
Well,
maybe a better question is: are there anything that's really going way under the radar that is out there for a really good price that you've seen?
Way under the radar. That's interesting. Okay, so let's roll back the time till 2009-ish. So going back to this real quick, this was right when Hong Kong did away with wine import duty. Everybody was after first growth Bordeaux, particularly Lafite. That was what the hype was from probably 2008, 2009 until 2011-ish. And then the Bordeaux market price came crashing down. And so arguably, those prices haven't recovered. if you look at the 82 Lafite, for example, a really, really pristine 82 Lafite back then can probably fetch about $7,000 to $8,000. Right now, you can probably find one for like $2,500.
So super premium, but in the context of where it was.
Yeah, it's not there, right?
Yeah.
So remember, we just talked about 2,000 curie de Lafite that hammered at $550. Right now, you can find the same bottle for maybe like high 180s, maybe low 200. So that was the height of Bordeaux. So after Bordeaux, people moved to the next region and pumped it up, and that was Burgundy. So Burgundy started creeping up maybe 2015, 16-ish, and then it really took a jump during COVID, like a lot of auto wine prices. Since then, Burgundy has tapered off as well. A lot of goofy wines like Arnaud Les Chaux that went through a roof came back down to earth fairly quickly. Domaine Bizot is another one. These two are the non-traditional examples, right? They don't have a long time. They don't have a long background. They just kind of got pumped up based on speculation and based on different winemaking style, this and that. DRC and Lavoie has also came down a little bit, but DRC is still fairly stable. Lavoie we don't know, right? Because everybody's waiting for Madame Leloup to pass away at some point. And I think people have been expecting that for the past 10 years, but she still haven't. So we don't know what Lavoie pricing is going. There's usually what I would call a dead person bump when she passed away. Meaning that when she's not technically making wine, she's not an owner anymore, there's usually a little bit of bump on that. But going back to your question, two-part. One part is what's hot right now? I have an answer that you would not expect. And maybe this is an Asia phenomenon. Hokkaido wines is what's really hot right now.
Hokkaido wines?
Japan.
Okay.
So
elaborate, please, because on the list of 100 things I would have asked first,
so
it
Japanese
would have been
wines,
1,000th.
Yeah, Japanese wines is pretty hot right now because, if your listeners drink whiskey, that drink scotch, that drink bourbon, you may know that Japanese whiskey has gone through a roof in recent years. Part of that is the belief of anything Japanese people make is amazing and wonderful because of their dedication to their craft. That's being translated into wine these days, where they would make Pinot Noir or they would make Chardonnay in colder regions of Japan. Actually, Japan as a whole is cold. They found spots in Hokkaido in particular that a lot of very, very elegant Pinot wines being made. How good that really is, that's debatable, depending on your palate. If I tell you some top Japanese Pinot Noir in the secondary market is fetching over $600 a bottle, would you believe it?
I mean, I'll believe anything in the wine industry, but no, I would not have guessed. It would definitely not have been
right. 600 is a high number.
Yeah, because they're $600. $100 will get you a pretty good Pinot Noir.
There's no domestic Pinot commanding $600 bottle in the auction market today. None
from the U.S. Anything is in
none.
The only one would be Burgundies.
Yeah.
That would command that.
Like the highest priced Pinot domestically is Marquesan. And that's probably 200 and change.
Mm-hmm. Is it a combination of what must be a complete rarity? I mean, how many cases are there? It can't be that many. Yeah. And how much is then exported out of Japan must be even smaller.
That's part of that. At the cellar door, those are probably released at $50 if we can somehow get it, right? And then when you can, it gets passed through who knows how many hands.
Right.
And, yes, the production is tiny. It's like a 1 barrel, 2 barrel, but there's certainly tiny production Pinot Noir in the United States. Domaine de la Cour have one of them. That's, 2-3 barrels, and it's not getting that price. Marquesan is not that high of production. It's not getting that price. So, yeah, a $600 bottle, that's Grand Cru Burgundy pricing. Mm-hmm. And really good Grand Cru Burgundy pricing. It's not any Grand Cru.
Okay. So I think that leads right into another question is how important is provenance in the auction world? It's obviously really important, if not the most singular important, but how do you verify a wine's backstory? So you get a bottle of that Japanese wine in. How do you go about verifying that is real? It's not been counterfeited, which if people are listening in wondering, wine counterfeiting is a real thing. So, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you could, if you have any stories about things that you've personally found to be fake or faked, or that you wouldn't touch it because you couldn't authenticate it.
So to elaborate on this, like people will have questions about whether this thing is real or fake, right? Like when you buy luxury goods, if you buy luxury handbags and you see at random stores, you will question that. The number one rule is don't take unnecessary risks, meaning that if anything looks off to you, just don't buy it, right? And that's
Off as in shady, like some guy just walks down the street and opens up his
or when you see a bottle in front of you,
right.
Especially when it's an older bottle,
Yeah.
you go, yeah, this something doesn't feel right. Whether the capsule's too new, the label's too clean, or something, this is a far longer conversation.
Yeah.
But going back to the provenance, it's basically every single bottle we bring in to our auction, we would catalog, inspect, and photograph these bottles. And a lot of time when we do get consignments, we actually physically go out to the collector's cellar to pack up the wine. So we actually see what kind of storage condition these guys have. We don't really worry so much about how the wine is stored once it's in this collector's hand, meaning that we check them out, we see what we see, and it's always professionally stored. What's really more concerning is before it gets to this person's hand, how are the wine kept or shipped, and where did he buy it from, right? The running joke in the wine industry is always milk gets shipped better than wine. When you see a delivery truck, milk is always in a cold delivery truck, no matter what, because what happens to milk when it go bad? It goes spoil, it can kill people, right? It's going to taste like shit, and you might die from it. Wine, on the other hand...
You won't have a pleasant evening.
Yeah, you won't. Wine, on the other hand, if it's shipped in heat, unless you can see visible damage, it's not going to kill you. It's just going to taste like crap. I think wine shipping as a whole has gotten a lot better in the last 20 years.
I know you recently had a really big consignment, and some of them were really old wines on original boxes and original wood crates. Shipping today is much better, door to door, right? Do you have concerns about, we were Powell gave me a tour of the facility earlier, and he pointed out some, I think 1976 German Rieslings in the original cardboard box. Amazing. I mean, the cardboard box looked almost entirely new, and the label outside of it looked like it hadn't been touched at all. Do you worry about what's the concern on things that were shipped overseas, 50 years ago?
So here's the thing. When you look at a bottle, it tells you a story about itself. When you look at the packaging, it tells a story about itself to you if you listen and feel and look carefully enough, right? So with this particular collection that we have going on auction in July that Rick just mentioned, this collector had over 10,000 bottles we packed up on 24 pallets to ship it back from Colorado. Some of his stuff is just ridiculous. We found unopened original cardboard cases of 76 Riesling that Rick just mentioned. And when I say a bottle will tell you the story, is that when you open the box and when you pour the bottle, you can see the fill level of this wine. It's like right below the capsule. And the people who love Riesling knows Riesling is notorious to have seepage issues.
Yes.
Because of the sugar content, because of the interaction with the cork.
And seepage means that a little bit of the wine has basically gone underneath the cork and leaked out down the side.
Sweet wines tend to seep more, and there's got to be some kind of reaction between the wine and the sugar and the cork to make it more porous, I guess. So, but with these cases that we opened, I mean, they were really untouched and nearly pristine. Like, I think we're doing catalog photography earlier today and yesterday. Out of the 8 or 9 unopened cases that we just opened for cataloging and inspection, I think I saw one bottle with seepage on it.
Wow.
So
it's not a condition of storage. It's probably just the condition of that one crappy cork in that one bottle.
But as a whole, being these are all pristine, so the wine tells you a story on how well kept these are, right? On top of that, we had two original wood cases of 1978 Beringer Chardonnay, private reserve, That's an almost 50-year-old Chardonnay. And the color on those, there's some variation. That's easier to see because it's white wine. But, the fill level are all great. They're all 3 centimeters or less. So another thing to look for when you buy an auction is that you have to look at the fill level of a wine. Again, this is a longer conversation, but you need a general knowledge of this. So this is probably a very broad stroke, but just for everybody's benefit, if you buy anything that's less than 20 years, if it's a Bordeaux-shaped bottle or Cabernet-shaped bottle, you want to fill level into the neck somewhere. Okay, don't buy anything below that. I don't care how cheap it is, just don't buy it. If you're buying Burgundy shape or the bottles that have a sloped shoulder, then anything within 20 years old, you don't want anything below anything. You don't want a gap to be bigger than 2 cm, meaning under the capsule to the fill level. You need to be 2 cm or less. As the wine age more, the wine's going to slowly evaporate more. So, if you get 30 to 40 years old, then maybe 3 cm is okay, 3.5 maybe okay, but that's probably as far as I would go, just to cut down the risk.
Yeah.
We certainly hear about Burgundy with 4.55 cm ullage. That's still very healthy and drinkable, but that's more in the unnecessary risk category.
Okay. And then you should avoid anything that looks like it had leaked, right? And especially anything in a recent vintage.
Yes.
And that's indicative of usually like a heat exposure.
Yeah, 20 years, 25. I mean, my rule of thumb, I don't buy anything that leaks. I don't care what it is.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a really, let's say I did buy, this was a few years ago in 1976. I think it was an Alsace, late harvest Alsace Gewürztraminer.
Yeah.
And it had a little bit of leakage in the past.
Right.
The bottle itself, it was fine when I opened it. There was a lot of sugar in there still that it hadn't. You look at the light, and it still had a decent color to it. And that was more of a special occasion, which leads me into another thing, is that if you're just buying for a special occasion, is it just don't worry so much about the, is this the best wine you've ever had? Or are you just looking should people just consider this is a special wine from a year, it's older, appreciate it for what it is?
I think when you're trying to buy a special occasion wine, you actually may have to be a little bit more careful because you don't want a bad bottle of wine to ruin your evening or ruin your special occasion, right? So on the safe side, buy sweet wine. They don't ever go bad.
They just leak.
Yeah, they just leak. But, buy a Sauternes, buy a late harvest Riesling, buy a TBA. Yeah. But again, temper your expectation maybe. I don't want to say that because once people spend money on it, they expect to get something out of it, right? You shouldn't say temper your expectation. Buy smart is probably what I would say. If you're buying a vintage wine to celebrate your anniversary or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, let's say somebody's looking for, it's 2025, so we'll go back 40 years. Somebody's looking for a 1985 wine. What's the first thing they should consider? Should they look at an auction? Should they look at a retail shop? Again, I think what we talked about, most retail shops are not going to have vintage wine unless it's a specialty. And there's just not as many specialty wine shops anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, your best bet if you're looking at any vintage wine is auction market. Simply for the fact that they get the most stock from all the collectors around the world and all the different sellers. And
you guys are backing the wine to some degree. You've done the work on the provenance.
Right. Every single auction house is sold as is.
Yes.
However, we do touch and catalog and verify every single bottle that does come through our site. Basically, we eliminate as much risk for you as possible. But a lot of that, anything else beyond that is beyond anybody's control.
Yeah. And do you guys, you don't taste any of this? You're literally just going by the outside of the bottle.
No, we do.
You do? Okay.
We do. The big cellar we picked up in Colorado, we're getting 36 bottles with tasting wines across his collection. And we're going to use that at pre-auction dinners and also at our live auction venue that if you're here, you can taste some of them. Depending on the collection, right? If it's a larger collection and we see there's necessity to open the bottle to taste them, we will. Even on a smaller side, we will sometimes ask consignor to say, hey, we should probably taste one of these because we just want to see how everything is. So we do taste the wines when it's necessary. I mean, if we know the collection is clean, then there's no reason to do it. Even when it's clean, but we want to showcase how well kept the collection is, then we would do tastings, particularly for live auction settings. But when you're buying something that old, you just have to be careful on where you buy it from. And there's a lot of nuances that people still don't understand. Like, we probably get a phone call like once a month from somebody that's buying a 30, 40 years old bottle of wine using a typical weighted corkscrew and say, oh, the cork crumbled. Well, it's not. It's not because it's not stored correctly. It's not any of that.
Yeah. I'd say it's more rare to get a cork that comes out whole at that age, past 20, 25.
Yeah, cork is an organic product. It's really got a shelf life of 20 to 25 years. Anything beyond that is a crapshoot. I don't care how you keep it. It's still a crapshoot. So the best way to open an old bottle, I would say, if you're opening anything over 20 years old, have an Asso, have a Durand, just to use it to open them. It's safer that way. But then going back to buying older vintage and what your expectation is, be reasonable. Right? If you're buying a goofy bad year, like I don't know, 72, that's terrible around the world, good luck.
But you could still find something maybe, like an old Barolo that you can get. But I think to Powell's point is that may not be a great wine. It may not be a good wine. It might not even be a wine at that point.
Well, and it's funny you brought up Barolo. They're even more dangerous because the Italian people back then, they used cheap, crappy corks that's not meant for aging. There's a wine merchant that a lot of industry people buy from Italy. Take a Delart. I think that's what's it called. Very reputable retail merchant. And the owner would double check every single bottle before he ships it out from Italy to the United States. There will be times I would put in an order and he would say, yeah, don't buy these. Doesn't look very good. But even at that, when we get a wines, there's still at least a 20% failure rate on these 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s Barolo, just because the cork they use is so crappy. It's not anybody's fault. Well, maybe the producer's fault. That's back 40 years ago. But then again, it's not their fault either because they don't expect these wines to be kept around for 40 years. Yes, buying an older wine, you should have fair expectation. And if you want to err on the safe side, buy something sweet. Buy port, buy Sauternes, buy whatever.
Okay. Yeah. So, but kind of go back to the 85. I'm going to look at, if I'm looking for something, is set a budget maybe. Like, you're not probably going to get a good wine that's 40 years old at $50. It's just really tough. It's possible, but it's tough. You're probably going to have to pay in the $100 to $150 to $200 range to get a really drinkable. And there are plenty of other people that have, like Cellar Tracker is a great user review resource. Powell and I have been on Cellar Tracker probably since the first day.
Yeah, Cellar Tracker is a very good resource.
People are, you may not know if any, you may not personally know somebody that had that, but at least online, someone may have had that within a year or two to give you an idea if it's still drinking well or not. So I think beyond that is always region and producer to me. Like a Bordeaux is just going to be better than, I know I'm from Temecula, I'll just say Temecula, is going to have a higher chance of being a drinkable wine at 25, 40 years old than another region.
So like using 85 for example, and this is actually going to be true for any vintage for the most part. Your cheapest option and your safest option is going to be Sauternes and port. I think 85 is the clear year for port, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you can easily find
85 grams, 85
like $60 hammer.
Yeah.
You can probably find a lot of Sauternes from 85 for around the same hammer, and they will be beautiful. They'll be plenty fine. If you want an 85 Burgundy, which is a good Burgundy year, it's going to cost you upwards minimum of a couple $100, I think. You would be able to find some 85 Bordeaux for less than 200 still. Actually, plenty, because 85 is not a particular. 85 is an average vintage in Bordeaux, so you can find a lot of stuff for under $200. You just need to make sure. So actually, going to the fill level thing real quick. If you find 85 Burgundy, you don't want it any lower than 3 centimeter. At least I wouldn't do it. For the Bordeaux and Napa cab side, I would say very high shoulder would be your minimal fill level. Because even though 85 is 40 years old already, if it's kept properly, a lot of stuff is going to be at base neck still for Bordeaux and Napa. And then Burgundy 3 cm would be easily achievable. So yeah, depending on your budget, there's a budget for everything, right? A port can last you a few days. It's $60. Sauternes is the same. So you don't need to break the bank per se.
Okay. Well, that's good advice. So one last thing before we get to a special tasting that I've put together for Powell. You live in Southern California. What do regions like Temecula, do Temecula wines have any presence in the resale or collector market at this point in time?
As of right now, no. In the future, I don't know.
What does it take for a region like Temecula to appear in those markets, to get some traction, is there anything other than time? And we talked a little bit about Paso wines 25 years ago had no retail or no resale and presence in the auction market. I mean, they did, but at the very, very low end, like just disposing of them.
You almost need like a event you need one of the two things, like a well-publicized event, like Judgment of Paris, which put Napa wine on the map back in the 70s.
Right.
Or you need a singular scoring like a 85 Gros Reserve by Parker, 100 points that even elevated Napa wine more to say it's capable of making good wine. You need critical approval, which I don't think Temecula really have at present time.
Yeah, the only critical person is Matt Kettman from the Wine Enthusiast, and he's pretty much, that's it.
Your whole region needs to work together to bring up the image, and also more importantly, you have to bring up the entire region's winemaking skills. Right. And viticulture practice, right? I don't know, I haven't been down there, so I don't know what you're getting per acre, right? If you're still looking for 6 to 8 tons per acre, well, good luck. You're still not going to make any good wine in 20 years.
Yeah.
You have to emulate what the top regions are doing, whether it's viticulture practice or whether it's winemaking practice. You basically have to copy them step by step first, and then take what really works and weed out what doesn't, and then implement other stuff that can even make Temecula to another level. And that's a long road.
Yeah. I agree completely. I've talked about it before. I've talked a little bit on the podcast before, and I mentioned to people all the time. And when I first moved there, people were like, "Oh, Temecula is the new Napa." I'm like, "No. Let's not go down that route. Maybe it should just be its own thing, and solve its own problems first." And I think the things you mentioned are the right track. And then to gain, I think, to having wines that can hold their value and maybe sell for a bit more or sell for close is really just time and skill.
I don't think anybody else in the United States can be the new Napa, because Napa is in such geographically, they can draw from greater San Francisco, greater Sacramento area. They have so much population within an hour-and-a-half drive, which Temecula doesn't. I mean, from LA to Temecula is what, 3 hours, 2 hours?
From here?
Yeah.
It's about an hour and 15, hour and 30 minutes.
Yeah, but to LA is like almost 2 to 3.
From Temecula. It depends on the day, traffic. It's 90 miles, but that doesn't mean anything in Southern California.
Yeah, it's.
Well, they say there's 22 million people within a 3-hour drive.
That's not bad.
It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to do coming up next, we're going to take a little break here, is usually on the podcast, we do 2 blind wines, and I ask people which one's from Temecula and which one's the same varietal or style of wine from somewhere else in the world. But today I have just a single bottle wine from 2009 that I personally bought on auction. I won't say how much right now, but once we do the tasting, I guarantee Powell is not familiar with the producer,
Nope.
the value, the original retail price, the library price, or the price that I bought this at. But we are going to pop it open, pour it, and get Powell's reaction on the wine and also the condition of the bottle, because that's what he would be looking for buying a vintage wine. So we'll take a break, and we'll be right back. All right, I am back with Powell. He's first going to look at this one bottle of 2009 Temecula red wine that I brought in for him, and he's going to assess the bottle quality first off, and then he'll tell you about the condition of the nose and the condition of the wine, and then give his thoughts on the wine.
Okay, so if we were to get a bottle of this in our auction site, we will first look at the fill level, the capsule, and the label of the wine. The fill level on this bottle was into the neck, so there's no problem there. The capsule is complete. There's no rip, there's no tear, there's no nothing about it.
So to go with the capsule, should it spin freely, or does that?
No, that doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
We don't test that. The only minor defect on this bottle we would note is a very lightly scuffed label. And this bottle have a black label with a gold trim, so it's usually easier to scuff anyway. So that's on the surface, right? That's when we catalog the wine, that's what we consider, and that's how we look at it. If it's older wine, we'll certainly hold it up to a light and look at the color to see how it is. But in this case, we don't usually do, and we don't need to for something younger. Now, when we open the bottle, there's different things we can look at. Today, Rick used Corbin, so we cannot look at a cork. When you open the bottle and you have a cork out, you can see if there's any signs of heat damage based on the cork. It doesn't need to be leaking. What you do is that when you look at a cork for signs of heat damage, is that if it's heat damage, there's usually like a streak of wine popping up, shooting through the cork somehow. If it's evenly rising to the bottom, to the middle of a cork, that's usually not heat damage. That's probably mostly the age of a cork, and that happens naturally. But if you see one line or even two lines like streaking up the cork, that's heat damage.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Usually I always associated the cork itself being pushed up a little bit, but
Well,
again,
that too.
that can be too.
Yeah, but that's something that we can see visibly.
Okay.
Right? So when we're cataloging the wine, we would say protruding cork. That's something I wouldn't buy, right? If you're
Right.
saying that. There's certainly instances that the corking machine didn't do its job, but we'll ignore that for the most part. Yeah.
Okay. But a streaks would indicate poor quality cork.
A streak will indicate more often than not heat damage.
Heat damage,
And actually extreme heat at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cork itself, when you take it out, should have sort of like it had been just a section of it dipped into wine almost.
Yeah,
and
a little
nothing
bit.
else. Right.
And sometimes
Okay.
you actually don't see that at all.
Yeah,
especially
sometimes.
when it's new. And then, even on 10 to 15-year-old wines, I see some perfect seal that you don't see any wines creeping up at all.
Okay.
But that's under, once in a blue moon circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on beyond the heat damage and the cork. So we're going to look at what? Aroma? An older wine's always going to, to me, have a little bit of funk,
Right.
at first.
So when we open a wine and we pour it, the first thing we look at is the color. This wine have medium ruby and maybe I would say light bricking on the rim, very, very light bricking. Aromatically, it's very fragrant. It's actually somewhat powerful, I guess. There's a lot of chocolate notes to it, and I guess Rick mentioned that they use a lot of new oak, so that's proper. The wine smells clean. I don't smell any fault. There's no VA, there's no Brett. So as far as the nose goes, this seems like to be a well-made wine.
Is there a sign of heat damage in the aroma that you would? Or I always associate heat damage with more of the taste profile on the palate.
Yeah, it's mostly that. Or if you smell something overly acidic, maybe that's part of that too.
Okay.
Or even it's hard to say.
It probably varies because Italian wines can have that, balsamic, vinegary that is just natural to Italian wines, especially Amarone.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there's certainly stuff you smell. Go, okay, it's crap, or it's bad, or both, and I can't really quantitative that into words. But for the most part, you taste it, right? If it tastes like oxidized, it tastes cooked, like really, really baked cooked fruit. Well, but even at that, there's some Amarone would taste like that, right? It's not always true. So you kind of still have to know your basic about what each wine region is supposed to taste like to kind of have a better assessment on that. And then as far as the taste on this wine, I think it's well made. It's probably a little bit riper than I would like it. The acid seems a little sharp, so I'm not sure why that is. Maybe winemaking, maybe something else, I don't know. But overall, this is well made. There's nothing wrong with this wine. It's certainly also an enjoyable wine. And the question is, maybe the question of what your audience's interest is, what people should pay for something like this. I don't know.
Subjective, right?
Yeah,
You know?
it's subjective. I can probably go find a dozen wines at Costco that cost less than $30. That's comparable to this or better, right?
So Powell knows nothing. So so this is it is a blend of, I think, 5 or 6 different grapes: Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Zinfandel. What else did I say? Grenache. And I forget. I'm probably
something like that.
familiar. Yeah. And so originally, this retailed for $120.
Okay, so released in 2011, 2012 by $120, which would be more expensive than a lot of Paso wines.
Yeah,
Much less.
Today, as a library selection, it's at $450. $450 on library.
Well, you can ask what you want. Are you going to get it? No.
Yeah. And I pay $25 for this bottle off of auction.
Yeah.
And again, this is me knowing where to look and knowing the pricing and knowing that this was also the highest rated Temecula wine that's ever been rated at 94 points.
Yeah. So I think, honestly,
it's not a bad bottle of wine.
No, it's not a bad bottle of wine.
This is what I would expect for 30,
I wouldn't be
50
unhappy
bucks.
if I paid 25 plus hammer on this. You know,
I'm not unhappy.
Yeah.
I think it's still a good quality, very good quality wine.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with the bottle.
Nope.
It was stored pretty well, I would say, based on the condition of the color, the aroma. The bottle itself looked better than many that you would buy on the shelf at a retail store, to be honest. It's perfectly, it's drinking totally fine. So I'll just leave it as, if you want to go and buy the wine, on library release for $450, you're more than welcome to. And this isn't to bring down the producer at all, which I just won't mention. But you can do your own due diligence and Google if you're really inclined. It's only $25 value, really.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only person that bought it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's worth. My point isn't to denigrate it in any way at all. It's just to be realistic that the wines that you may be listening to this and picked up some wines for whatever amount of money from Temecula. If that's what you want it to be worth to you, that's what it's worth to you. But to the rest of the world, it may not be at that same value.
Yeah.
And that's true of any wine. And I'm sure you get wines and clients that want to consign something, and they might have paid a crazy amount for a case, and you just have to look them in the eye and say, you're going to get $25 a bottle.
Yeah. With our business, with the auction business, most of people, we always tell people, like, when they want to sell wine, is you will get more money in return if you consign a wine to us, and then we put it in an auction process and let the course take itself naturally. There's certainly people that ask if we can just purchase the wine from them outright, which we could, but you're not going to get as much money back because we have to take on the risk of inventory and actually selling it.
Okay, so one last question we asked everybody is, what are you pairing with In and Out? It could be anything, any wine, any beer, any sake. It could be your, Hokkaido wine from Japan. What are you going to pair with In and Out?
What am I going to pair with In and Out? Well, the tacky answer will be Cheval Blanc, right?
And that would be a reference to?
Sideways. Yeah. But, we did, something you can pair with whatever the hell you want to drink that's going to pair well. Actually, this reminds me of a story. This had been in 2011 and 2012. We're doing a pre-auction wine dinner in Hong Kong, and we had, I forgot the vintage. We had Le Fille, Le Mission, DRC. We had 70s Napa Cab on the table. I forget which producer. And then somebody out of the blue go, I want some French fries. We're at a Chinese restaurant. So the restaurant we're at sent a staff downstairs to McDonald's and brought back 3 orders of large McDonald's French fries. Some of us decided to pair that with DRC, which was magical. It made the wine taste so much better. It's ridiculous.
Did it really?
Yeah, it actually did.
Was it this kind of salty savoriness
it's
of the
that salty savoriness to bring out more fruit and more depth on the DRC? So that worked, right? So I guess if I had to pick something to go pair with In-N-Out, why don't we just go with my birth year wine, 1975, Joseph Phelps, Eyes of the Vineyard.
Oh,
let's go with that.
All right.
Because I'm actually bidding on the bottle right now in our auction.
Yeah, so we know what Powell's going to have later this year for his birthday.
Yeah. Which you're invited.
All right, sweet. Excellent. All right, well, we're going to thank you very much, Powell. But before we go, I got to give you a free plug. So plug Spectrum Wine, plug the upcoming auction, which I will more than likely.
So we are Spectrum Wine. We are based in Santa Ana in Orange County. So we have auction, wine storage, and retail. So if you want to buy retail wine, we have it. If you are running out of room to keep wine in your cellar and you want a professional storage facility, we have that. And most importantly, we have an auction site that we actually do weekly internet auction that starts every Friday night and close the following Thursday at 6 o'clock. And we would do live auctions. Right now we're scheduled to do twice a year. So we have one coming up in July. That's taking place in Orange County. We will have the official invitation out soon. At the same time, if anybody have wines that they want to sell or auction off or consign, they can contact us directly, and then we will get you an appraisal so you have an idea of what your collection is valued at. There's no obligation to get an appraisal. If you need it for insurance services, we can even, help you out with that a little bit.
Can it be any amount? Like if they just have a case, like, if I was looking to sell a case of 2000 Bordeaux.
Well, as long as it's well kept, and then we can see that it's well kept, that's fine. I mean, preferably we usually like a few cases of wine, maybe say $5,000 minimum or something like that, but it's not necessary. It depending on your wine and depending on how it's kept. And then we also actually take spirits as well. So if you have poppies and whatnot that you want to turn a profit based on what you pay for, give us a call and we'll do an appraisal for you and let you know how everything works.
Okay. Is it spectrumwine.com?
Yes, it's spectrumwine.com.
All right. There you go. All right, Powell. Thank you so much. And it was great to see you again and talk to you. So cheers.
Appreciate it.
So that's a wrap on my conversation with Powell Yang. Just a quick note, Provenance is a wine preservation system that lets you pour wine without pulling the cork. It uses a thin needle to access the wine and replaces what you pour with inert argon gas, keeping the rest of the bottle fresh for weeks, months. I've honestly even kept a wine for, we'll say 3 years, and it really had not deteriorated. After our chat, Shannon and I, along with a group of local wine pros, opened the 2009 Temecula wine that Powell and I discussed on this podcast. The cork showed a significant wine streak on the side, and after sharing my photos and texts, Powell and I both agreed it likely suffered some heat damage along the way. That said, in my honest opinion, and his as well, it didn't really affect the wine in the glass. I actually won a second bottle at that same auction, and I'm planning to reach out to the winemaker to get his take, maybe even bring him on the show if he's up for it. Check our Instagram account for some photos. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Pour Temecula and leave us a review. It really helps keep the conversation flowing. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming guests. Until next time, keep exploring, keep sipping, and cheers.